Hi, everybody. Today's September 15th, 2023, for the entire day. And I'm here with the Lou Perez, who's also named Lou Perez. He's a comedian and he's actually funny on top of that. Lou, tell us what you've been up to. What are your major topics? And tell us, I think you have some kind of debate going on with yourself, with somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah, I have an ongoing internal debate happening just about existence and manhood and masculinity and all that. But in addition to that, in addition to all that stress, I have a book out called "That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore" on the death and rebirth of comedy. And coming up this Wednesday, September 20th, or this upcoming Wednesday, I forgot that we're in a different week. I'm going to be debating comedian and author Michael Ian Black at the Village Underground in NYC, and the topic is wokeness killing comedy? And I kind of wrote a book that touches on a lot of that stuff. So if I don't know if Michael is doing any reconnaissance, maybe he'll stumble across this one, and then I'll give him, basically be giving him all my major points. So.
Well, I actually would like to hear them, but how could anyone debate the opposite? I mean, I'm assuming that you believe that it has not been good for comedy, say.
Right. Yeah, I think with debates, when you're sort of on the outside, you're like, oh, that could be an interesting topic. And then when you actually get invited to do one, you're like, wait a minute, what does this mean? Is wokeness killing comedy? Because for him to, he's taking the no position. I'm taking the yes position. Because I don't think he could argue that wokeness is good for comedy, but he doesn't necessarily have to argue that.
Right. Maybe it's just comatose and not quite dead.
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel like Monty Python's parrot.
Right. Or T.S. Eliot's a patient etherized, on a table. But yeah, everybody that I've told about the debate and have reached out to me, they all ask that same question, like, how can you argue that it's not? And these are fellow comedians, these are people in comedy, these are club owners and all that I've been talking to, and it really puts me in a position where, like, man, if I don't win this debate, then I'm just a loser. If I can't, just hit this one out of the park, if I can't pull this one off, and what am I even doing?
No, that's a rough thing. I was in this rough situation. I skipped a grade in elementary school, and for sleepaway camp, we wound up by grade. So I was a year younger, and that delicate time when boys are going through puberty, I was probably a late bloomer anyway, but I was a year behind. I was a year younger than everybody. And so there was this kid that everyone didn't like in the bunk. There were, I don't know, 10 of us, whatever. And like they kind of rooted for me because I was the scrappy, mouthy underdog kind of guy to beat him up. So they arranged us in a fight. But the thing is, he had hit puberty and I hadn't. So all my kind of like snarky, mouthy stuff, they really desperately wanted this kid to be beaten up. And I couldn't follow through on it because he had like, testosterone muscles that I didn't have yet. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen here.
Oh, I mean, as far as I know, the both of us have gone through puberty, so, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I had that advantage. And he's a few years older than I am too. He's got a little bit like 10 or more
He might
years.
be going through womenopause.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. I got to dig. I got to get really nasty and like dig into like, his relationships and gossip and stuff like that. I want to keep it all personal, away from the actual subject.
Yeah, if you can't argue really a topic, ad hominem is often
exactly from the get-go.
Yeah. So tell us about your book. That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. It kind of goes over the shifting landscape of comedy. Can you elaborate on how you perceive the evolution of humor and comedy over the years, since we're talking about wokeism, but prior to wokeism, what was going on with it? Ups, downs. I mean, there was kind of the comedy boom, maybe was it the 80s, and then there was the opposite of a boom, a moob, I guess.
Right.
That would be spelling boom backwards in the 90s. What's been the kind of panorama for you?
Well, yeah, it's interesting to hear about the comedy boom in the 80s, and then like the downward trend in the 90s, because I think that had to do more specifically with stand-up comedy. Because in the 80s and 90s, me, growing up as a kid, it was like comedy was just all over the place, and really great comedy too. So, in the 80s, it was, Eddie Murphy, in the 90s, Jim Carrey and, Will Ferrell. And you had all these, all these different really important shows. And what was interesting is you would see like some of the most interesting experimental comedy happening both on like the big screen and also on TV, both cable and television. It's just comedy was all, was all over the place. And I think in recent years, comedy has definitely moved to the online space. Like if you want to see stuff, if you want to see really interesting stuff, you're going to have to seek it out online, or, hopefully the algorithm on one of the platforms will, send you some good comedy. And in the early 2000s, well, I went to NYU. I graduated in 2004. And it was around that time, maybe a couple of years later, that YouTube came around. And I was a sketch performer, and it was like, here was an opportunity where you could put out sketch comedy and potentially reach millions of people that you've never even knew you existed. And that was such a great time. It was another great time of experimentation, of play. And around that time, like I remember when we were producing stuff, our goal was always to get the sketch out at latest Saturday afternoon, because Saturday night is Saturday Night Live. So there was always like this fear that, oh man, we came up with an idea, we scripted it, we spent all this time shooting it, editing it, and all that. Man, what if we put it out late and SNL turns out that they've already done something on the topic? Like that was a huge fear. And that used to be like a real fear. I haven't had that feeling in well over a decade. I don't know anybody who really looks to like SNL as, that flagship, comedy must see, television anymore. So I think like I said, I think a lot of the really great stuff that's happening is happening online.
So, well, we could go forwards, backwards to the present. We're going to get to the present and future in a little bit, but your own comedy journey started with, from what I understand, appreciation of George Carlin. Can you discuss any moments or jokes from Carlin that significantly influenced your style, perspective on comedy, and or other progenitors of your own comedy essence? And then, how and when does one realize one's funny? That's a totally separate question, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think most people realize that they're funny, whether it's, hanging out with friends or, schoolmates. If you're able to make your classmates laugh, there might be something that's something's working. To then make that leap from class clown to being able to actually make complete strangers laugh. Not a lot of people, go that route, and understandably so. As far as, George Carlin was a huge influence. I sort of like look back, and it might be, I don't know if this is a knock on my parents, but I just think about all the stuff that I got to watch when I was probably way too young to watch it. The idea of me as like probably 7, 8 years old watching George Carlin, and it's not just the, the cursing, but also, the subject matter, and finding, like, obviously not understanding everything that he was saying, but still finding a lot of things funny. Like a lot of things spoke to me, even though I was a child. And something's happened over the years where as I've been doing stand up, I find myself like sometimes doing mannerisms on stage, and people are like, "Oh, you look just like Carlin," and I'm like, "Oh, I guess I sort of with my hair and my receding hairline."
Well, I was thinking that just seconds ago. I was like, oh, yeah, I can see a little bit there.
Yeah. And I, I take it as a, as a compliment. I'm not trying to, uh, I wouldn't be able to, deny that. So,
Hmm.
mhm.
And others at the time, and then how does it evolve that you decide, oh, that's my career path, say?
Yeah, let's see. At the time, I mean, I absolutely loved like Kids in the Hall, which are a sketch comedy troupe out of Canada. They were fantastic. Um, for me, I guess I caught the bug in college at NYU, where one year I was just like, hey, I want to try improv. I've heard about this. I've seen like Whose Line Is It Anyway on TV, and that used to
Right.
just make me and my parents just roll
Mhm.
laughing. And I was like, oh, I want to try this, and I tried it and I enjoyed it. And then before I knew it, I was in a sketch comedy troupe. And then I was really enjoying being up on stage and getting the attention. And I just kind of kept going with it. It was, uh, yeah, as far as like making like a conscious effort to be like, okay, you're going to be doing comedy. I sort of turned around after a while and I was like, wow, I'm spending a lot of time writing, rehearsing, performing, very late nights, doing this stuff. Um, and yeah, then you turn around. I'm like, man, I've been doing this for like 20 years.
So
What
when
was
when
that?
you're
Was your
yeah,
experience as a doctor? You're like, you know what? I just started just diagnosing people one day
yeah,
and
no,
late nights.
there's actually there was a moment. I did have a. I mean, obviously it's different, and you have to be very much more planned about it, and you're going to devote solid 8, 12 years of your life almost consecutively before you get to hang out a shingle and so forth. But I took it my own. This is not about me, so I'm trying to make this really quick. But medical school, then residency. I had a girlfriend, and I didn't match my residency where she was. And so I decided to take a year off after internship, split things up. I was going to go finish residency, blah, blah, blah. We wound up breaking up. And I was looking for work as just a 1 year experienced doctor. So I wound up in West Virginia, a very impoverished area in general. And I wound up in the poorest county in West Virginia, amongst other places. And one day I was moonlighting, literally, because there was moonlight and moonshine south of Charleston, which is the capital. It's the other Charleston, West Virginia, not South Carolina. And so I'm the only doctor there. I'm only the doctor within a few miles, probably 5 or 10 miles, and everything's quiet. And all of a sudden, apparently, with no video cameras back then, somebody gets dumped off in a pickup truck, gets rolled off the back of the pickup truck, and he's basically dead, been stabbed. And they bring him in. I'm the doctor. I got to fix this guy, or something. And they bring him in, and medical school is like a bunch of lectures sitting, da, 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 but the actual practical thing where that's going to translate to seeing somebody who's like dead in the middle of the night in front of you, and you've been awakened, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh my. And so I saw there was a tiny little punctate wound, maybe got almost like a letter opener, like a stiletto knife or something, right in his chest. I'm like, well, he must have hit the heart. We put an EKG. There's nothing. He's flatline. He's dead. And I'm like, well, either he's dead or he's got cardiac tamponade, which is like when you get the lining of the heart, you get the heart and the lining of heart. And so the blood goes between the heart itself and it's kind of saran wrap around it. And it fills that up and the heart can't beat. It's kind of strangled by this kind of balloon of blood around it. I thought, well, I remember hearing about that. And so you're supposed to take an electrode on a needle and put the thing until you get the beat of the heart. And then you pull it back a little bit and then suck out blood if it works, right? So I did that, and they're kind of looking at me because I'm young, and I could barely shave then anyway, and and the thing works. Like the blood pulls out, and his EKG flips to life, and everyone's like almost ready to cheer, and I was like, I feel this great flood of emotion and so forth, and so did this guy apparently because he was right in the middle of his bar fight till he died, and he's still just as drunk as he was 10 minutes before. And he wakes up from the thing, and I'm the guy apparently who had just knifed him in his mind, like somebody had just knifed him, and there's a guy right in front of him with a needle, whatever. So he attacks me. He comes to chokes me. He gets up from the bed. He starts choking me. And fortunately, there were 3 or 4 people around. They all pull him off and everything like that. But there's blood everywhere from the blood from his thing. He's choking me. It's like, oh, okay. So that's being a doctor, I guess, sort of. I mean, I've never had anything that kind of stunningly
Well, well, what was this fight better than the one at Sleepaway Camp?
Well, both of them I came out alive. I'm not sure either one I was victorious, but yeah, they wind up memorable. I mean, the funny thing about fights is if you do live, they are memorable. There's a lot of energy and tension, which gets to my next point about comedy itself.
Yeah.
Energy and tension. Comedy, laughter is essentially the kind of the release from tension. Can there be comedy if you are not right on the edge? And if you're not going to be on the edge, aka being woke and so forth, how can that even be funny?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I just want to say that whatever we're about to talk about, that story that you told is 10 times more interesting. I have so many questions. That's incredible. Really, I think when you look at life, it's like you just need that story. Like I'm sure a bunch of other, just insane things have happened. Like that's all you really need.
Yeah,
And
I don't even think of that story that often. I don't know. I'm not sure why I thought of it right now.
yeah, you're good on that. Yeah, I think that they're definitely. Yeah, I understand the need for tension. There's also something where you have the setup and the punchline, and you have comedians that do one liners where that is very much what it is. It's like the setup, a little misdirection, and then the punchline. And one of the things that I've found sometimes is that there are audience members who will get offended and even tune out just with the setup, or even just hearing certain words, like where it's sort of like some certain words will trigger a response for them where they're sort of like out of it and not being willing to hear the punchline that brings it all together. And it's sort of, I think that's one of the troubling things at the times we're living in, where certain words are given I don't know, just so much weight that some people can't even see behind them. Like if you say the word black, it's like, okay, what's coming next? Well, what's this joke going to be? And that's something that I've seen a little bit. I was doing what was it? You brought up Charleston. I did not go to Charleston, West Virginia. I recently went to Charleston, South Carolina, and I was talking about it on stage, and just working out material, and basically saying that my wife and I took this romantic trip to Charleston, South Carolina, because it's very much known for very romantic. And then someone yelled out slavery, and it's like, well, I was gonna, like, you kind of fucked me up by yelling that out, because what I was trying to do is say, well, we went there because I heard it was a romantic foodie town, and it turns out there's this history of slavery, which is the opposite of romance, And it's like, oh man, if you could have just shut your mouth, I would be able to actually get this premise out and then actually go with it. But the fact that Charleston and the historical reality of chattel slavery was in the air, this person felt like it was incumbent upon them to shout out what the subject matter was going to be. So,
did you go with it? What did you do? What do you do with hecklers?
Yeah, I was in a weird position, like with these hecklers, because they had heckled a couple. Like they had, like almost right from the start of my set, they had started heckling. So even by the time I got to the South Carolina stuff, they were already being assholes. So anybody out there, if you're ever thinking like, oh, maybe I should shout something out, like, no, never. It's never good to be a heckler. And I was in a weird position where I was the first comedian after the host. So the host got up and was trying to, like, warm up the crowd, and then I'm the first one up. And then after me, there was going to be 3 or 4 other comics. So it's sort of like I was put in this position. If I go hard on these hecklers, then I might derail the show for the rest of the comedians. So sort of walking like a tightrope there.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because they actually have paid ostensibly.
Yeah. They have pain. Is that what you just said?
No, they have PAID.
Oh, paid. Yeah.
Maybe afterwards they should have pain.
Yeah.
But they ostensibly are your patrons, right? I mean,
right.
They are supporting you, and you also want to get at them. you know, do you ever listen to Jimmy Carr?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Jimmy
I mean,
Carr stuff.
I'm sure he has a bunch of lines prepped for
Mhm.
hecklers, types of things, and there are a lot of people who seem to have a sideline and certainly remixing their anti-heckler comments and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, and this one in this event, it was a couple. They were both like African American, and I believe they were both shit faced. Like apparently, like later on, like when we
That's a
went,
technical term, right?
yeah, shit faced. It's when your face is covered in a in a like the heart thing that you described, but it's just being it's just alcohol based and um yeah. So and what's funny is like we find out that they were shit faced after the show, where the guys who let them in were like, "Oh yeah, man, they were really hammered." And it's like, well, maybe you should you should think that through.
Mhm.
Is it a good idea to let in this hammered couple who's going to be shouting out during the show?
Yeah, have there ever been any kind of like follow-up threats or danger or anything after the show? I mean, if somebody does get reverse heckled.
No, thankfully not. Yeah, I'm happy that nobody's threatened to beat me up or
Right.
do anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the satanic verses and um, there's there are probably like realms that people can't or won't go, or some of them do and will. Um, but
Yeah, I try to keep all my novels uh, about
so do you worry?
Muhammad and all that out of the public reach.
Yeah, I mean, you have hundreds of Muhammad jokes, right?
Uh, yeah, but I just want everyone to know it's not about the prophet. It's about a different guy named
Muhammad
Muhammad.
Ali.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I woke up one morning. This is actually a true story. I had this kind of shadings of a limerick in my head, and you know how people say actually and really, and
Hmm.
ly is an adverb, and so I was trying to come up with like in my head. Apparently, right before I woke up, I was coming up with a poem. People do things this really, actually, and Muhammad Ali.
I like that.
I didn't. I haven't. I kind of forgot about that one till now, but that could be a vein of humor, right? No, not really.
Yeah, yeah, wordplay, for sure.
Yeah, Muhammad Ali.
Yeah,
Um,
there's some people who are really great at wordplay. Like, I'm very jealous, being so quick with stuff too.
well, that is kind of my thing. My kids do not think I'm well. Begrudgingly now and then they think I'm funny, but they're like, "Oh, you're not funny. You don't. You just do wordplay." It's like, well, you did laugh, right?
Right.
You did laugh. That's like definitionally funny. And then we actually had to make a rule in the house. We have a few different rules, and one of them is that even if you didn't like the thing, if everyone laughed, it was funny. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's like that was funny. So the sensitivity to offensive material, it all seems heightened right now. Um, so do you like literally navigate creating content that remains true to your style and not alienating audiences? I mean, I don't know how things work.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it comes down to what I think is funny or worth taking on. I think one of the things that I talk about in my book is sort of the rise of wokeness. Is that you have a lot of like woke comedians that basically uh, shut themselves off from certain parts of the world in a sense. The subject matter that they will allow themselves to take on, and I think some of it was definitely political in nature. For a lot of people, Donald Trump was such a existential threat that even that giving an inch in any capacity that could possibly help him was a no. So I had a number of friends of mine who, were lifelong Democrats who obviously voted for, voted for Hillary, who voted for Biden, where they would try to make jokes at the expense of Democrats, and people would say to them like, "How dare you do that? Like, do you have any idea how important the next election is? And here you are, taking down a Democratic mayor, and and it's it's something where it's like it's obviously annoying, to be in that position if you're a comedian. But then I think it opens up opportunity for other comedians who are like, well, I don't care, if that
Mhm.
if you have a problem with that. I see a subject that's worth making fun of. I'm going to go and
Mhm.
make fun of it. So it's sort of a, there's a lot of like sort of like being an entrepreneur. It's like, well, there's a market here that nobody, that
Right.
few people are going
Untapped.
after. Yeah,
Untapped.
so let's do it.
Yeah, no, that is a niche thing. It's also funny, I like Key and Peele quite a bit,
Mm,
and I didn't like Chris Rock when he first came out. Over time, I've come to appreciate him. I think he has some really awesome routines, but it's one of those things where they get to do some of the things you've seen. Like Key and Peele can do black and black comedy. I, I'm not a comedian, but you got to be careful about it. And I noticed that I uh, my car has like a it's Tesla, so it's Tesla radio. They've got this thing. This is every week. There's a comedy roundup, and it's just so kind of balkanized. Um, there's some Korean guy. He's doing comedy about Koreans, and then an Indian woman about Indian women, and so forth. People are just making their own self-referential jokes of the smallest groups. I'm a Pakistani in Milwaukee. Okay, it's like
right.
very tiring, tiresome stuff. Um,
Well, I think someone, actually, a couple of friends shared with me an article today out of the New Yorker about the comedian Hassan Minaj, who he was on the Daily Show. He had a Netflix show, maybe a special, and I haven't read the article yet, so bear with me. But apparently, one of the one of the things that came out is. And this is a quote, I think, from I think it was a tweet sent out by the New Yorkers. It says, "In his comedy, Minaj tells harrowing stories about experiences he's faced as an Asian American and Muslim American. This week, Minaj acknowledged for the first time that many of the anecdotes he related in his Netflix specials were untrue." Untrue. And
I was doing my Biden whisper.
untrue, untrue. And I have a buddy of mine who pointed out, it's like, damn, man, if you're telling me that this guy, he's brown, he's a Muslim, and his whole life in the United States, he hasn't faced any prejudice. Like, what is
Yeah,
that?
I think he should probably make his next set of jokes actual ones about his being a bad comedian.
Yeah, yeah.
So you know what it's like being a bad comedian? People call you a bad comedian. They say you're not funny. Like,
right.
Can you believe it? I walked through this neighborhood and I was telling jokes and they said I was not funny.
Yeah.
I was so hurt.
I like the idea that we have the term like little white lies, and now we have little brown lies. Where it's sort
Oh
of
my God.
so that's where we are. So I'm looking forward to reading that New Yorker piece, because so much of so much of the woke stuff in particular, it comes down to identity. It comes down to which boxes do you tick when it comes to what makes you what you are, and from there it'll be determined what topics you're allowed to talk about, what perspective on those topics are you allowed to have, who is allowed to talk about these topics, just all this stuff. And it's sort of taken for granted, this idea that if you're brown, in America, then you must have the exact same experience as all brown people in America. And it's just it's something that's just so obviously stupid
Right.
on its face.
I know I have a hard time with that because like, well, dude, or dudess, depending, um, your family moved here. Like,
Right.
you know, like, I get slavery, they didn't ask to come. I get it. But it's like, you know, I mean, Nigerians come here, Pakistanis come here. Like, there were a lot of brown people in Pakistan, if that, if you want to call it that. I don't even really like the term, but
Yeah.
but it's like, what was wrong with being there? I mean, if I went to Pakistan, frankly, I'd have a hard time. I mean, Daniel Pearl went there, and he did not have a great time.
He did not. Yeah.
So and it's like I think about it. A friend of mine, one of my neighbors, actually, a black woman, um, she recently went to Zimbabwe, and um, she knew somebody there who was like on a mission kind of thing. So she had somebody to visit and whatnot. But she went, did some tour stuff. She was not like there by herself. She was somewhat insulated, and she had a guide for parts. Blah, blah, blah. But even so, I was like, wow, you think I should put that on my list? She's like, oh, it was really a lot of fun. Da, da, da. Anyway, I've got Zimbabwe fear because it's been such historically a poor place. Even though Mugabe's not there anymore, I just think there's going to be a lot of probably petty theft and this and that. And I will stand out. And I'm not sure she really had the appreciation for it, but if you go there and you're black, I mean, if I go to, I don't know, I don't know, Germany, whatever, I'm not going to stand out per se. If I go to Zimbabwe, I will stand out, and it's obviously that you are a tourist or you're not from there. Anyway, I'm not sure if there's much depth to pursue there.
But although your one-man show of you going to Zimbabwe is going to be fantastic, I can't wait to hear all of the. Well, we were talking about people who choose to come to the United States, and it's something where a lot of stuff just doesn't compute for me. Like say for example, during the Trump presidency, Trump was often called a fascist. He was often called a Nazi. He was called Hitler, and the same people that were, making all these charges against Trump were also for immigrants or, migrants or illegal aliens coming to the United States. And it just doesn't make sense. It's like, well, wait, if Hitler is in the White House, you want to tell these people, wait until Hitler is no longer in the White House, and then you can start coming. And it seems like a lot of people got that memo, because
the thing is,
the border
whatever term there was for Hitler when Hitler was there, if people had called Hitler that pre-Hitler Hitler, then they wouldn't be doing that very much in the future.
Was there a term for that Hitler was called before he even came around? Yeah,
I don't know. Good question.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to go back and suss that out. So it sounds like you've kind of had your finger in a few eras. What's the evolution of humor and comedy over the years? Is there one? Is there an evolution? Is funny always funny?
Well, I would say that there's something I really appreciate when I'm able to put on like a classic bit of comedy, and it still makes me laugh, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe that this was done so long ago. So like Rodney Dangerfield always delivers, and you look at some of his performances, you're like, these are performances from like what, 60 years ago, and the jokes are still hitting. It's incredible. Movies as well. Like I recently saw or rewatched John Cleese's A Fish Called Wanda. It's fantastic. It's hilarious. It's such a funny thing. So I think there's obviously going to like music. There's going to be comedy that's dated, that's really for the times that it was, and then there's stuff that just will, I think will just live on forever because it's so good. Like I know I'm just rattling off just like random things. Richard Pryor has some bits that are just, I'm jealous that I didn't write them. And it's like, well, how could I write them? They're Richard Pryor's life. They're just incredible.
I never quite got into him. Everyone keeps telling me how funny he is, but I didn't really grab him. I haven't seen the right things. But I agree about Rodney Dangerfield. This is almost seems very mild, but P.G. Wodehouse, spelled Wodehouse. He has these stories, and I can just read them endlessly. And they're not laugh out loud funny, but they're always funny. The guy just knows how to write and have timing, have this kind of right way of turning a phrase, get you involved. Speaking, to that point, how much crafting and wordsmithing, whatever, do you do? And do you, find it, is it a written craft, or is it a mirror, visual, verbal, video mirror craft? Do you practice in front of the mirror? How do you practice in front of people? Like, how do you work on making this instrument, this tool?
Yeah, it's I think so I do a lot of sketch comedy and comedic monologues that I film. So with that stuff, there's a lot more, sitting down and crafting the script beforehand, because obviously, because you're going to, be recording it. When it comes to stand up, a lot of times, like I'll get up there kind of with maybe a one liner, 2 lines, and I just need to work it out in front of people. So it's I actually wish that I was maybe it's something I just need to make a more concerted effort to treat my stand up the same way that I treat my sketch comedy, in that, make more of an effort to really just write everything out, get it scripted the way that it needs to be, and then perform it and hone it. Yeah, I don't know what there's like I don't know if there's like some like a mental barrier that I have, where I have somehow, sort of like separated these, two different genres, where it's like, oh, I have to approach them in different ways. But no doubt with stand up, you have to do it. You have to do it live. And it's one of these, it's an art form where, sometimes, you go and you absolutely kill, and then you take the same material and it doesn't, and it doesn't work. And you're like, well, how does this, how does this happen?
Yeah, it's a funny thing.
Yeah.
I like telling jokes, and I can, tell a reasonable story here and there. Never professionally, but there are times when, you kind of feel like you're surfing a wave, like you're right there, you're catching it, and you can see how people are anticipating your next, moment, so forth. But it's and then other times just totally flat.
Yeah.
I don't know. The audience is different. They're in a different mood, different day of the week.
It's also
or the fact that you've broken into their house and
yeah.
gagged and bound them, and I mean, seriously, like you have the audience right there, have them propped up in the chair, hands behind their back, and I'm going to tell them jokes, and they're just not reacting in the way.
And in that situation, you're kind of the heckler, so that makes it tough. I was going to say about the live aspect too. It's so important to be present, to actually be in the moment and understanding what's happening in the room. And something that I used to struggle with was, if I hadn't been up in a while, and getting up in front of an audience, it could feel kind of like robotic, where I'm just sort of doing the material, but I'm not fully involved, because maybe, part of me is very nervous, and I'm like, oh man, I'm really rusty, blah, blah. So I have all that stuff going on. So, the most fun is where it's like you've, in a sense, like you've exercised, you've gotten the reps in, and you're in front of a new crowd, and you're totally in it. Like, and it's also fun to like try stuff in the moment. And normally, like, I try to open with something that I can comment on that's happening in the moment, for that audience, that everyone's there. The other night, I was I performed at a fundraiser in my neighborhood for some people who are running for office, and I'd never met these people before, and my wife had sort of arranged the thing, and sort of like a little bit of pressure there, where I'm going to essentially be performing stand up for a half hour in front of neighbors who I've never met before, and it's like, if I suck, like, they have to see me at the supermarket, they have to see me at the playground, So it's like there was that tension that I was dealing with, and I was the only comedian. I was only like the only like entertainment there. And everyone who spoke before me, they were all, kind of serious and actually very good public speakers, which sucked too, because it's like, oh man, like, they've actually made some laughs and stuff. I'm like, oh God, what am I getting into? The guy who went up before me, he had one arm. The guy had one arm, and he was fantastic as a public speaker. He was great. And he got up there and he talked about how he lost his arm as a child, and how, part of that fight to overcome has been with him, ever since then. And when I got up there, I, said how great of a public speaker he was. And I said to the crowd, and I'm also happy that he told us how he lost his arm, because we were all thinking it, like, what the hell happened here? And like, thank him for doing the work. And thankfully, the audience, they were into it. They were laughing. They were in on it with me. But that could have gone terribly wrong. I could have had an audience full of people like, you believe this guy just pointed out that this one-armed man, spoke before him? Like, so there's part of in comedy. I think there's the there's risk, and there's kind of like, oh, there's a little dangerous here. Like I might derail my whole existence for the next half hour
Yeah.
if I say the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing pretty well so far. I don't feel alienated at all.
Great. You are very far away. We are, we're talking in two tiny screens.
So let's see. Had some scripted questions here.
Oh,
I don't know. Let's see how this one goes. Might be too stilted. You highlighted the importance of judging people as individuals rather than based on their race or ethnicity. How do you incorporate this perspective into your comedy, especially when discussing sensitive topics? I don't know if I like that question.
yeah. That's a question you, as an individual, came up with, for sure. There was no collective there. Well, I think a part of it is being willing to call out silliness or hypocrisy, regardless of who the culprit is. I think that's really important. In the book, I talk about how uh, I've read a lot, or I've seen a lot, this idea of speaking truth to power, and that comedy is supposed to speak truth to power. And it got me thinking, well, when did when did it change, and comedy was no longer just about speaking truth? Why does it have to have this power component to it? Because in there, it's sort of this idea that, well, if you have power, then I could speak truth to you. But if you are powerless, well, then I can't call you out on it, which I think is pretty, I don't know, patronizing. And also it makes for, I don't know, you kind of get out of what would otherwise be like uncomfortable situations. Like, just because somebody's homeless doesn't mean that they can't be an asshole. It doesn't mean that you can't call out. And look, I lived in New York for a while. There are a lot of homeless assholes. It's like, yeah, I know you're like downtrodden and all that. Maybe it has something to do with you being a dick. Like, maybe the reason why no one wants to live with you is because you'd make a terrible roommate because you're such a jerk.
Yeah, and your omelets are horrible.
Yeah, yeah, the worst. The worst. Yeah, yeah.
So I got an a-hole story. Um, I was doing not personally, but I was doing narcotic detox. That is perpetrating narcotic detox on a bunch of other people who had addictions to narcotics, and I was
No fun. You're no fun, doctor.
yeah, I know
Yeah.
taking and I was pretty strict about it. I only wanted people who wanted to be clean, and sometimes it took people more than one attempt at it.
Mhm.
But along the way, I had a corrections officer, and I'm going to leave jokes aside there. But he had been shipping drugs into the prisons and all that kind of stuff. He was kind of a corrections officer who needed correcting, and um, he was in my practice for a little bit, and I was trying to get him clean and so forth. But he was showing up with other drugs in the system, blah blah blah. It wasn't really working out. And I gave him one strike, two, anyway, three strikes. He was out of the program, and he made a whole scene. He called me that word for my butt end in front of the staff and all this kind of stuff, and screamed out, "He's never come," or whatever. And then like 3 months later, he shows up in my practice, and he wants to have me detox him again. It's like, I'm getting old, but I'm not so old that I don't remember the last time
Right.
we were here. And you want me to detox you? Why, if I'm such a bleep hole, do you want this bleep hole to treat you? He says, Doc, I've been to other places and they pretty much just do what I want. If I want more drug, they give me more drug, methadone clinics, that kind of stuff. I tell them, I give them a bunch of lies and I get more stuff. I'm getting all the drug I want. I'm just not getting clean. And to get clean, I think I need an asshole like you. So that's kind of like the endearing part of of that word, I guess.
Yeah. And
So
I think being straight with people too. It's like just calling out bullshit wherever it is.
yeah, it's kind of funny because amongst guys there is this kind of inverse concept that we insult each other and we like that.
Mhm.
I think it's XBCD or whatever it is, cartoon. Um, and I bring it up a few different times. It's only 4 panels, and there's men and women at a party. Each panel, the men at a guy's party watching football, whatever. Women at a women's party, they have I don't know, hors d'oeuvres, whatnot. And so the women are all complimenting. Oh my God, I love what you do. Your nails are amazing. Oh my God, your hair is awesome. And the guys like, and in their panel, they're like, oh my God, Bob, when did you stop, screwing your sister? They're all insulting each other. Well, that's because your parents are pygmies. Otherwise, you probably would do the same thing. Anyway, they're back and forth insulting each other. Sorry about pygmies. And then the next panel, they're all leaving. Each one, the women are leaving the women's party. They're all like, oh my God, what a bitch. And they're
Right.
all insulting each other. And the guys who have been insulting each other when they're together, they're like, oh, George is just unbelievable. I love that guy. What an amazing guy. And it's kind of like, this, insulting. It really works amongst guys. People kind of like that tension and the excitement and whatnot, and women not. And so I guess here's a question for you. Women comedy, uh, I don't know. On rare occasions it does, but for the most part, it does not work for me. It's sort of like the WNBA. I mean, no offense to either league here, but it just doesn't, really grab me. I kind of feel like comedy is this act of guys trying to step up so that they can, get over the fact that they may not be the most attractive, the tallest, whatever, the best athlete, and to make them shine. Kind of like Steven Tyler and Aerosmith. Otherwise very not say the top in his class for sex appeal, but he's running a rock and roll band.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't. What was it? Who got in trouble? Was it Christopher Hitchens? I think he got in trouble some years back for writing something in Vanity Fair. I think it was the title was something like "Women Aren't Funny," and then I think he said a bunch of stuff that wasn't necessarily that original. I mean, I've heard it before. Comedy. I think it's true that comedy for the most part is a male dominated field, and there's good reason for that, or it makes sense why it is. I will say that that there are a lot of really funny comedians, whether they're stand up or actresses, um, and that sort of thing. A joke that I've said is like, if you want proof that women are funny, I mean, just look at Eddie Izzard. She's hilarious. Um, which
Is
will,
that the Leah Thomas effect that men make better women swimmers?
something like that. And there's something there for everybody to get to laugh and be annoyed with. But I think for sure there's there are reasons why men dominate comedy versus women, and a lot of it in my book I talk about it. I talk about two conservatives in comedy and how a lot of people point out how few conservatives there are in comedy, and it's like, well, kind of makes sense. I mean, comedy is a really risky venture to devote so much time and money to, that there might not be a big payoff or any payoff really. The amount of people who have been doing say stand-up comedy for 5 years plus years, and aren't able to support themselves on doing gigs alone. It's just like that's sort of the the norm. So there's no guarantee in comedy that you'll be able to make a living, whereas plumbing is a pretty good idea. Being an engineer or electrician, like that makes a lot more sense. Being a doctor, even though it's probably a little, being a doctor isn't as hard as being a comedian, but if you want to pick your number one and number two career paths. So I think there's a lot of stuff that that goes into that.
Yeah, no, it's funny stuff. Basically, I mean, I think that the best thing is to have a passion for it, no matter what it is that you're doing. So we're kind of rounding out the hour here. I'd like to talk about that. Actually, frankly, maybe the funniest era in our history, recent modern history in the U.S. COVID, I think they called it.
Yeah.
So you sent me a clip recently. You want to talk about that and or the COVID era and or stuff regarding your position, so forth, whether how your voice came out or didn't, and how has it affected the rest of what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted you to just let me know if my heart's going to be okay. I got the Pfizer shots when they came out. I was so excited about that, and now everyone's got me.
I didn't get the Pfizer shots. I would not have gotten any shots, frankly, having had the illness, and I never have immunized anything after having the illness of it. But my wife wanted to travel, and I wanted to stay married. But I picked the J&J because I think I would rather have a less good virus, less good vaccine, and avoid the untested platform. But you look alive.
Yeah, I look alive. About a year ago, it was September of last year, like around the time my book came out, I had an incident in a hotel where I thought I was having a heart attack.
Oh my!
And I drove myself to the emergency room in Philadelphia, which I recommend if you guys don't just die in your hotel room. Just don't even venture to an emergency room in Philly. Fortunately, I got all the tests and my EKG, everything was fine. I think it was a panic attack. It was like the first time I'd had a panic attack, and it was, it scared the shit out of me. And, immediately I'm like, oh man, am I going to be, am I propaganda? Like if I went, are people immediately going to be like, well, Lou was vaxxed. So, we're thinking that's probably what did him in. But yeah, ever since then, I've been taking much better care of myself. Stress can really fuck you up for sure. Yeah, I mean, in the back of my head, I'm always like, oh man, did I make the right choice? At the time. But at the time, I with the shots. I mean, I was told, oh, this is a way to protect the elderly. Protect those with comorbidities.
Yeah, that's when they get the vaccine. That's how we protect them.
Yeah, there we go.
So I'd like to cover your book. I'm going to put it up on the screen so people can look at it. You can tell us where we can buy it. Let's see. This is.
Ooh, it's on Google Books. Wow.
Yeah, it is.
Is the whole thing available on Google Books?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, just parts of it.
Yeah.
This is a preview. It says here. But maybe is it on Amazon and so forth?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and I also have an audiobook version that I narrate as well. So
people probably can find it through your webpage.
It's over. If you go to thelouperez.com, my book should pop up for you. And if you ever see me live, I usually carry some with me if anyone needs a hit, and their doctor isn't detoxing them off of my book.
So here we go. Order my book, and there's some sites here. Yeah. Misgendering a Murderer. I have not seen this.
You haven't seen that?
No. I have a lot of Lou Perezing to catch up on.
It's 20 years, baby. 20 years of comedy.
I have to spend some time to peruse Perez.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's want to tell us what that means? Misgendering a Murderer?
Yeah, so Misgendering a Murderer is the first sketch comedy video I made with the organization Free the People. Uh-huh. And it's a series called Comedy is Murder. And it's the premise comes from a New York Times article that I read a while back, where they describe this 83-year-old woman who has killed another woman. So this woman, like back, I don't know, decades ago, had murdered, I believe, a girlfriend, and was let out of prison, went to a women's shelter, ended up, I guess, I don't know if she befriended this woman who would, turn out to be her next victim. Mm-hmm. And, you're reading this and you're scrolling down, and then I forget how many paragraphs in, they let you know that this woman is actually a man who identifies as a woman. And, just reading the article and the lengths that the New York Times went to not misgender this freaking animal who took the lives of women, I was blown away. So I came up with the premise for the sketch, where it's basically an interrogation of a serial killer who identifies as a woman, and one of the police officers is trying to be a good ally and respect her journey, and the other one is just like, this is obviously just a ploy to to game the system.
Wow. Yeah, I'm actually going to. I thought of this actually before Ben Shapiro thought of it, but I wanted to just change my age. Because I thought it'd be really, I could probably do well in the SATs now, and I actually did pretty well then. But it'd be fun just to be in high school, and it's just people like, no, you can't do that. You are not 15. It's like,
right.
QED.
I try to identify as 6 feet tall. I'm 5'10", but I walk around like I'm 6 feet tall. I got the confidence of a 6-footer.
Yeah, there's still time. So I'm going to give you a chance to make closing statements, but I'm going to just pop in a quick commercial for myself. If you want to help support my video cast, podcast, and my life in general, and it's all about me in this case, so you can buy my book, Overturning Zika, people at home, that is. It's about the pandemic that never was. Same price. It's got a picture of me on the cover here. People may not remember it as 2015-16 Brazil, and there was a pandemic. And it's gone away completely. Nobody talks about why it's gone away. My book, in kind of genuine Sherlock Holmes fashion, gets at the issue of why Zika microcephaly has disappeared, why it was such a big deal then, and then nobody's talking about it since then, why it's disappeared, also all that kind of stuff. Long story short, there was probably bad science at the beginning. Anyway, I think it's really, very timely in a sense of understanding how the public health apparatus works, Dr. Fauci and so forth. It's actually a pretty chatty read. I didn't make it for science people. I made it for people in general. And so I kind of spoke the book out, a lot of it, in interview, and then I, put some of those parts together to make the book. Anyway, it's a shining light. It's probably the best Zika book out there. And there you have it. So final words, Lou.
Thank you so much for having me on. You and I, we first met on the Cut the Bull podcast. That was fun. I hope people will check out my website, thelouperez.com, check out my book. And if you're in New York City on September 20th, come down to the Village Underground, 6 p.m. I'm going to be debating, is wokeness killing comedy, and hopefully winning that debate. So,
yeah, well, I'm going to be down September 27th. So I'm going to miss it by a few days. But I certainly wish you luck. I would like to hear it or watch it, if that's a possibility, if it's going to be packaged in any way.
Yeah, it'll be on the Open to Debate website. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully there's a link there, or you'll send me one or whatever. So thank you so much, Lou, for being on our show. People can follow you on thelouperez.com. Is that right?
Yep.
And you're on Twitter as?
At the Lou Perez.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody, including our guest.